This week, volunteers across the country are canvassing neighborhood after neighborhood, surveying hundreds of thousands of people. They're on the front lines of how the U.S. assesses and responds to homelessness, an issue state and local officials fear will only be made worse by the migrant crisis. It's a census of unhoused people called the point-in-time count, and it's a federal requirement that can have funding impacts in many communities. In tonight's Prime Focus, with homelessness on the rise, some advocates are now questioning whether this count lives up to its purpose. Our Jaclyn Lee reports.
Hey there. Hey, we're doing some street outreach. Do you need anything?
Whether it's on a freezing January night on the outskirts of Kansas City.
All right, nice to meet you, Ramon.
Ramon, nice to meet you.
Or first thing in the morning on a cloudy Seattle day. Volunteers like Maggie Thomas and Officer Mark Canovi have their flashlights at the ready. They're hoping to illuminate as many dark corners of their community as possible.
This is an encampment I've never been to before, which I thought I'd been to all of them, but this one I've missed.
From deep into the woods under railroad bridges to isolated parking lots.
What led you to being out here?
To the side of the interstate.
God is real,
Yes, sir.
and God is right behind me. And I've been stepping through this whole situation, and I'm not going to stop. And Jesus is going to keep me alive.
Looking for their neighbors who are experiencing homelessness tonight. It's all part of the point-in-time count, a requirement by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, known as HUD, that sometimes affects homelessness funding.
The biggest issue, I think, is to make sure that we know where the big problems are, that we can address in a very, very specific way communities that have the highest need. So that's really why we do a point-in-time account.
Any place that you don't find people, but that looks like it may be inhabited, just send me the location from the list.
Becky Poitras helps coordinate the point-in-time count in Missouri's Platte and Clay counties.
Shaving cream, shampoo, toothpaste. We really dig in and ask some extremely personal questions that some people may be uncomfortable sharing, and that's okay. Anyone can choose not to participate.
Poitras sends the results of the count to a statewide group, which then goes through the data and passes it to HUD.
It doesn't give communities a great picture of what homelessness looks like year-round.
And Poitras isn't the only one with that concern. In Seattle, Owen Kafis says his agency still conducts the count since it's a federal requirement, but they've also invested resources to look at what homelessness is like there over the entire year. Using those resources, they've estimated that their region's actual homeless population is more than 4 times what the point-in-time count found.
So the point-in-time count found between 12 and 13,000, but by comparing the data sets, you found 53,000.
Yes.
That's insane.
Yes. It's almost a scale of magnitude greater than what we've been talking about for decades in this region.
Advocates from groups like the National Homelessness Law Center have raised red flags for years.
Hello, Path Outreach.
Asserting that around the country, the point-in-time count is a major undercount of the unhoused. They say we shouldn't count on the count for funding or policy decisions.
The picture that HUD is getting and that Congress is getting and that the public is getting isn't as clear as it could be and should be.
When you're out here, what do you look for when you go to approach someone?
So, I mean, honestly, I don't assume someone's homeless, right? Or experiencing homelessness. It's just a matter of just being respectful and asking, hey, are you experiencing homelessness? You have to be aware and cognizant of the impact even you being there could have on them. That could be traumatizing for people too.
The count takes place every January or every other January, depending on the community.
What's the first 2 letters of your first name?
Volunteers work on one day in the winter, looking for people they think might be homeless.
We do it when HUD tells us to do it. Now, every one of us who does this kind of work gets frustrated by that because we wish that we could do pit count when homelessness is at its highest, which tends to be early fall.
In an exclusive interview, ABC News asked HUD's current secretary why the count happens in January.
Doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense, does it? Because it's cold, it's hard to find people, people are inside, but that's when it's always historically been done, and we've just continued to do it the way it's always been done.
We're not afraid to do the legwork. We're not afraid to go out there and, get right in the middle of the encampments and talk to people, so.
Because it matters.
It does matter, it does. It definitely matters. Their voices need to be heard too.
In many parts of the country, like Washington State, with increasing development and a rising cost of living, finding affordable housing is only getting harder. So we're currently driving through Seattle. You'll see just a series of tents and encampments along the interstate. People aren't just out in the streets. They're not always in homeless shelters, but they're here on the side of the road because they have nowhere else to go. Washington Governor Jay Inslee says his administration has been working to clear roadside encampments and get people into emergency housing. He just requested an extra $100 million in state dollars to continue doing so.
We've had so many people move here and we haven't been able to build enough houses. That's the fundamental challenge.
Why is that?
We have had some zoning rules that were overly restrictive that have prevented us from building denser housing in our cities. So we've changed our zoning laws now where we have more places to actually build.
You're not a rookie governor. You've been the governor for the last 11 years. Do you feel like this is too little too late?
We live in a democracy. I'm a governor, not an emperor. And you have to sort of go with what the people feel. And they were not feeling this until the last couple of years. People now feel it in their daily lives.
The U.S. Government Accountability Office made recommendations to HUD in 2020 and 2021, calling on the agency to coordinate more consistent methods and use estimation techniques. ABC brought these concerns to HUD Secretary Marcia Fudge. She said the count is a sample, not an exact science, and acknowledged it may have flaws.
Most communities do it the way that they think best. I mean, we don't control every single community. Now, if they're differing every year and we have no good way to measure from year to year, then yes, that's a problem. But if they're doing it the same way, we should pretty much have an accurate count.
ABC News and ABC-owned television stations reached out to hundreds of point-in-time count organizers across the country. We found that the count is not conducted the same way across the board. Most counts relied on surveys, but only a handful used data based on the people they did count to estimate the number of people they missed.
The night that I was out, we didn't count anybody. There are people there, but we just couldn't see them from the windows of our cars, and so they didn't get counted.
Some communities use technology to help with their counts. Broward County, Florida even uses drones to find encampments and hires temp workers to assist. But others don't have enough resources or volunteers to cover their entire area.
They can only count as many people as they have eyes to count with.
That matters most in rural and suburban communities, where it's harder to find people than in dense urban areas. Suburban DuPage County, Illinois, and Bergen County, New Jersey have similar populations. But while DuPage has about 100 volunteers for its point-in-time counts, Bergen has 20. And the inconsistencies go even further. Just about everyone we asked had a different answer as to how the numbers are used.
If a region were undercounting, they would be at risk of receiving fewer federal resources to help with their crisis.
The actual number from the pit is very rarely used in order to get access to resources.
It's just trying to get that number over a 24-hour period, and that's what your funding comes for the following year. It's just, it doesn't make sense.
ABC asked HUD's leader exactly how the agency uses the point-in-time count numbers.
It affects overall funding, so it affects what we go to Congress and say. And so the problem becomes larger. We ask for more resources.
Hello, outreach.
Secretary Fudge said the point-in-time count is also used to hold local service providers accountable to their communities.
We're using taxpayers' dollars, so we want to be sure that they are being used properly.
ABC's data analysis found that across the country, waiting lists for affordable housing can be more than a decade long in some counties. In others, the waiting lists are so long that new applications are not being accepted.
People really have to be creative on what they're going to do.
And for some people, their solution has been sleeping outside, but they might not be able to for much longer. The Supreme Court agreed to review a case out of Oregon which would decide if cities can punish residents for sleeping outside, even if there aren't shelter beds available. Some argue the court's decision would affect the point-in-time count.
Where these laws are in place, you're going to be putting people potentially into jail where they aren't counted as part of the pit count, or you're forcing them into these more out-of-the-way places where they're more hidden, less likely to be counted.
Do you feel like states should be able to criminalize sleeping outside, effectively punishing someone for being homeless?
Well, we do require people to move on occasion for safety purposes, and I do think that's possible. You can't have people pitching tents in the fast lane of the freeway.
Advocates say improving the point-in-time count is only useful if its findings spark action. They say not enough is being done at the federal, state, or local levels to address homelessness.
The homelessness crisis is a complete result of failures of policy at every level of government.
Ultimately, it is local governments who bear a lot of the responsibility.
Secretary Fudge says the federal government's role is to provide resources to local communities. And from there, it's up to each of those communities to decide how to address homelessness. On Monday, she announced HUD's largest ever funding award of its kind. Secretary Fudge says HUD is considering ways to improve the point-in-time count as part of the federal response to homelessness.
We are taking a look to see how we can do it better, because certainly if we can, we want to.
Until then, the point-in-time count around the U.S. will continue as is, with hundreds of local counts wrapping up this week. For people like Maggie Thomas who are taking part, it's clear that homelessness in this country impacts far more of us than we realize.
None of us are immune from the possibility of homelessness. All of us are one bad decision, one lost job, one lack of society support away from being in that same situation.
So many in a similar boat. Our thanks to Jaclyn Lee for that.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.